Welcome into the latest edition of CityCast, where I take a look back at the week's news in Japan from this foreigner's perspective. And just to be clear, whilst the news is real, all the opinions are my own. Feel free to leave yours in the comments below this video. This week, Kumamon fails in bid to carry 2020 Olympic flame. Large-scale earthquake drill held at Tokyo 2020 Games venues. New law to draw more tourists to museums and other facilities in rural areas. New skills tests for Japan's elderly drivers with traffic offence records. National Ainu Museum to open in Hokkaido next year. So my first story this week comes out of Kyushu, and it's the story of the Yurikara Kumamon. Kumamon is the Yurikara of the Kumamoto prefectural government down there on the island of Kyushu. Now, the local government down there had sounded out the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee about the possibility of Kumamon becoming one of the torch bearers for the Olympic torch relay in the build-up to the start of the Games. Unfortunately, Kumamon was turned down on the grounds that, well, basically, he's not a human being. And it go on to confirm some more details that in order to be eligible as a torch runner, a person must have been born before April 1st, 2008. Now, according to the local government, Kumamon, originally created to promote the March 2011 opening of the Kyushu Shinkansen bullet train service, is neither a person nor a bear, and his age is a secret. But as to his gender, as you can tell by what I've been saying, Kumamon is in fact a boy. Now, it also goes on to, we also go on to find out that actually Kumamon's official job title is sales manager for the prefecture, which is quite hilarious. So bad news then for Kumamon. Now, Kumamon is probably one of Japan's most famous yurukaras. These kind of PR characters, fluffy, cute, weird, strange, that local governments, authorities, companies come up with to help promote whatever it is they're selling. And Kumamon probably became quite famous after the terrible earthquakes that hit Kumamoto in 2016. Kumamon to one side though, in recent years in Japan, there have been quite a few reports about there being a saturation of Yuru character across Japan. A lot of people don't really connect with them. They don't know what exactly they're supposed to represent. There's just simply too many of them out there. And well, there was a bid to get one of them to carry the Olympic torch, but it was turned down. And I'm quoting here that the Olympic committee officials were saying that they're not going to make special exceptions. So, what do you think? Would you have liked to have seen a Yurikara carry the Olympic torch, or are you happy to keep it to human beings only? Let us know in the comments below. My next story comes out of Tokyo, and it comes from Thursday's news, and it was the news that a large-scale safety drill for the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games was held at competition venues in Tokyo for the first time to prepare for a possible major earthquake during the Games. So during the drill, police officers, firefighters, self-defense forces, they joined together in the drill held by the Olympic Organizing Committee and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. And one of the venues they used was the Ariake Gymnastics Center. And so the drill, it turns out, was based on the assumption that a quake with a maximum reading on Japan's 7-point intensity scale hits the metropolitan area at 9:15 a.m. on July 26 next year, when events are scheduled to be held across 20 venues. In the gymnastics center, apparently Japanese and English announcements were made, calling on spectators to remain calm and to protect themselves. And while firefighters were talking to the injured to determine the severity of their wounds. And we also know that drinking water was handed out to evacuees on the assumption that the sun would be out and the temperatures would be high. Now, I think it's probably safe to say that the temperatures are definitely going to be high during the Summer Olympics next year. Now, obviously, carrying out an earthquake drill in preparation for the 2020 Games makes nothing but good sense. But this story, why I've selected this particular story, is that I think in recent years and in recent sort of natural disasters in Japan, there's been voices of concern from foreign tourists, from the foreign community in Japan, about just how readily available emergency information is to them in languages that they can understand. If we think back to Typhoon Jebi in 2018, that was the one that caused havoc at Kansai International Airport. And in the aftermath of that, there was quite a lot of criticism in regards to information that was available to foreigners, particularly in the Kansai area, who felt like they just didn't know what they were supposed to be doing during that kind of situation. I think since then, we've heard stories about apps being developed to transmit information in all different kinds of languages. We've had this something that they call yasashi Nihongo, kind of easy Japanese, that authorities are sort of pumping out onto social media platforms during times of emergency that is apparently easier for us foreigners to understand. So, give us your thoughts about this. If a major earthquake happened, would you know what to do? Do you know what to do? I guess many of you have been in Japan and experienced earthquakes before, typhoons, other natural disasters. Did you know what was going on at the time? Did you know how to conduct yourself? Where to turn for help? What the resources are that are available? Let us know in the comments below. Third story this week. This comes from Monday's news, and it is that the Japanese government is eyeing a new law which will enable them to make subsidies available for the improvement of tourist infrastructure, access, and other things of this nature regarding tourist-related facilities in rural areas of Japan. Now, this is probably not an exciting piece of news, but I think it speaks to perhaps the mood in Japan right now, that the kind of marquee areas in Japan, thinking about Tokyo and Kyoto, well, Kyoto in particular, are becoming saturated with tourists, and there's kind of, well, there's tension, I would say, between locals and tourists, between locals and authorities encouraging tourists to visit these areas. And the government, it seems, is, well, taking steps to try and, to encourage tourists out of places like Kyoto and into other parts of Japan. Now, this sounds all very noble and very good. I guess, and we get this a lot recently, kind of regional promotion. And I think there's this, well, it's a tricky one really, isn't it? I think you've got to have something to promote really in order to attract people away from Kyoto and some of the stellar attractions across Japan. But it seems to me, in my experience, that a lot of local authorities are just kind of hanging their hat on sites and attractions that just really can't compare to the likes of, I don't know, Kyomizudera or Ginkakuji or, I don't know, Tokyo Tower or somewhere like that. But fair play to the government, they're making they're eyeing up the possibility of making funds available to get tourists out into the rural areas, or let's say off the beaten track parts of Japan. Now, this is all, that's the positive news. Perhaps the cynical part of this might be that really what's happening here is the Japanese government is trying to make space for the 40 million tourists that they are targeting in 2020, and then following on that, the 60 million tourists that they're targeting in 2030. Now, all of these tourists, well, I mean, I don't think they can all fit in Kyoto, so they're going to have to go somewhere else by the looks of things. So the idea is to try and get them out into alternative parts of Japan. Next story this week. This comes from Thursday's news. And it is that Japan is eyeing up new driving skills tests for elderly drivers with traffic offence records. Now, if you've been living in Japan for any amount of time really, particularly the last few years, and if you pay any attention to the news, you'll notice that road accidents caused by elderly drivers is a serious problem in this country. And yeah, it seems like almost any time you turn the telly on these days, there's an elderly driver that's been involved in some kind of RTA. Now, this new skills test that the government is eyeing up, well, it comes from the National Police Agency, and they're aiming to submit a bill to revise the road traffic law to a parliamentary session next year to bring in the system. And in this system, elderly drivers will have to show they are fit to be behind the wheel on a test course at sites such as driving schools. Now, this new test is going to check the driver's ability to stop, turn, and do other basic functions smoothly. And those successful in passing the test will then have to take a cognitive function test. Now, one thing that the National Police Agency is currently thinking about is to what age level to set this new skills test. Should it be required for those drivers aged 75 or over, or should it be for those aged 80 or over? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Now, apparently, it doesn't stop there though. Those drivers that don't perform well in this new test, they may still be eligible for a new license that the National Police Agency will introduce, which only allows drivers to operate cars equipped with advanced road safety features, such as brakes to prevent sudden acceleration. This comes on the back of the news in April this year when an 88-year-old former senior bureaucrat caused a fatal accident in Tokyo's Ikebukuro district, running over a toddler and her mother. Now, if you're watching this and you're not based in Japan, this was quite a huge story in Japan. And at the time, it was one of the latest in a series of terrible traffic accidents that had been caused by elderly drivers. And it seems that it's this particular case that prompted many elderly drivers to surrender their licenses for fear of causing accidents. And it also led to the police agency to work on traffic law revisions. Now, the stats regarding these accidents caused by elderly drivers in Japan are, well, personally to me, they're quite staggering. As of late 2018, Japan had 5.64 million drivers, 5.64 million driving license holders aged 75 and over. And in the same year, in 2018, fatal accidents caused by drivers 75 years or above increased 42 from the previous year to 460. So I'm just going to repeat that again. That's fatal accidents caused by drivers 75 years old or above was at 460 in 2018. So this is a serious issue in Japan. Let us know what you think about the idea of these new tests. And also let us know about your own experiences of driving in Japan. If you're an expat driving in this country, how does it compare to driving on the roads back home? Final story this week comes from the island of Hokkaido. And on Thursday, a national museum dedicated to the Ainu ethnic minority in northern Japan was unveiled to press ahead of its opening in April next year. Now, this museum is located in the town of Shiraoi, and it comprises of a park to make up what's called the Upopoi complex. And at the museum and at this facility, visitors will be able to take in over 10,000 exhibits, which, according to organizers, will give them an easy grasp of Ainu culture. So featured at the museum looks like there's going to be kimonos, wooden ceremonial artifacts. There's also a piece from, I'm just reading here, a dugout canoe excavated from the Hokkaido town of Akeshi during the Edo period, and that's considered to be one of the highlights of the exhibition. Now, when the museum opens in April next year, it will have been around about 1 year since the Japanese government introduced legislation recognizing the Ainu people as the indigenous people of Japan for the first time. So if you're interested in the Ainu culture, keep your eyes on April next year. There's a new museum opening. It sounds like it could be interesting. That's all for this week. If you've got any opinions or you feel like we've missed out on any stories, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.